Welcome to the latest episode of 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app, on Apple Podcasts, on Android, Spotify, or the 5 Reasons YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe to Off the Floor, link right here in the description, $2.99 per month. That's where we're doing special stage shows. You also get updates there before you get them anywhere else during the scrimmage. That's where we put everything, not on Twitter. So check it out. Off the Floor, $2.99 per month. Link right here in the description. Also check out the great sponsors of the 5 Reasons Sports Network, includes our friends over at Prize Picks. Use the code 5FIVE. This is legal daily fantasy in the state of Florida. Use that code 5FIVE. You get $50 for your first $5 play. So it's a 10-1 match. Again, you can play MLB playoffs. You also, of course, NBA preseason. Yes, they have that on there. NFL and more. So go to prizepicks.com. Use the code FIVE. And now, today's episode.
Down to Biscayne. Yikes. 5 on the floor. Ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing, you can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars, wearing bubble frogs. Just like Butler said, you in trouble, y'all. Kept the floor playing, got it all band. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat we trust, it's power, have the guts. We're here to bring the heat, y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, and Alex Toledo, plus others from the 5 Reasons Sports Network.
All right, welcome back to 5 on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick and at 5 Reasons Sports. I got Sean Rochester. You can follow him at S Rochester NBA and also Coach Rochester on Instagram. Make sure you check out the episode that I did with Brady and Alex from the arena after the scrimmage. I know people didn't get a chance to watch it, so we tried to capture it as best as we could. I think that's the last time that I'll actually be combining stats from a player playing for two different teams during the same game. But again, what we took out of that, watch Pelle Larsson. That's somebody I've been talking about a lot lately. The Heat coaching staff's very high on what he's done, and you could see it last night. He just fits in everywhere, and he plays without the ball. He attacks contact when he has the ball. There's just a lot of good things there, and Spoelstra described him as plug and play. So we'll do more on him going forward. But today, Sean, we've been handed some content. We appreciate when the content gods bestow this upon us. Hopefully they can stop the hurricanes at the same time. We've got the 2024-25 executive survey, or GM survey. And essentially this is the 23rd time they've done this. And they ask the GMs a ton of questions. In fact, 50 different questions about the best teams, players, coaches, and offseason moves. Sometimes what I learned from this is the GMs don't know a whole lot more than we do. Because I sometimes I go back on these after the season, and they tend to be fairly off, actually, in the way that things actually play out. But let's go through them. And I know, Sean, you have some you want to focus on specifically. And we obviously want to get into the Heat ones. But let's get to some of the overriding ones they had at the beginning. Which team will win the 2025 NBA Finals? 83% Celtics, Oklahoma City 13%, Dallas 3%, and that's it. Nobody else there. And just one other thing I want to make clear is GMs are not permitted to vote for their own team or personnel, and percentages are based on the pool of respondents to that particular question rather than all 30 GMs. So it appears that some questions weren't asked of anybody. Are you surprised that in a year where it seems like it is ultra competitive in terms of contenders in both conferences, actually, that the Celtics, A, would be a runaway, and B, there would be only 3 teams that were picked as possible champions?
I would say I'm more surprised that there's only 3 teams than I am that the Celtics would have the majority of the votes. 83% is a strong majority, though. Like the betting odds don't boil that way. I mean, there's a lot of parity in the league. I think the Celtics are definitely the favorites, but I would say I would expect the Thunder to be a little higher than that. And then I would have expected a handful of teams, maybe 5-6 teams on that list. In the Mavericks, 3% is essentially 1 vote. So I think there would be other teams there. Surprisingly, the New York, Philadelphia, as much buzz as that has gotten, maybe Denver. I mean, there's just other teams I think that could be in there.
I'm with you on that. I mean, I understand why the Celtics would be overwhelming favorites. That first thing, the Knicks trade was just made, although I'm assuming that most of this was done after that. I don't know for sure. So that may play into it also. OKC being the favorite coming out of the West. Again, not a huge surprise, although it's very competitive out there. And then Dallas, they did just get to the finals. they would not be my pick this year. But going through the Eastern Conference, 97% picked Boston to come out of the East. 3% picked Cleveland. And I'm looking at this right now, and not only are the Heat not one of the top 7.
I was just going to say, I can't scroll down anymore. It only gives me 7 options.
Although there's nowhere to go. Now, it looks like the way that they did this was not necessarily rank at every seed in the conference, but simply pick the top 4 teams. And Miami did not get a vote for any of those. So for those who are saying, well, this can be a home court seed in the first round if some things break right, Jovic and Hawkins pop, Jimmy's motivated, etc. The GMs don't think so because they have 7 different teams with at least 1 vote for the 4th seed. And the Heat are not one of them. And they are the 7 teams that we've talked about all offseason: Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Cleveland, Milwaukee, Orlando, Indiana. And Indiana has just 1 vote, or just a couple votes there for 4th place. But it does sort of indicate that people don't think the Heat are in that tier. That essentially we're talking kind of Boston tier 1. And this is consistent, again, with all the podcasts that have come out nationally, that Boston is tier 1, New York, Philadelphia, maybe Milwaukee are tier 2, and then tier 3 is, Cleveland, Orlando, Indiana in some order, and then Miami ahead of, sort of in its own tier, which I think is where Hoop Collective put them, sort of in their own tier, right ahead of Chicago and I guess maybe Atlanta. Is this fair in your view?
I think it's fair. I mean, I think if they extrapolated this out to 5, you pick the top 5, Miami's in that 8 spot. Like they start getting votes at that point. Some people are going to trust Spo and this roster, get it done, and they finish the 5th. So, you know what? You could make arguments, whether it's Indiana, whether it's Orlando. You can obviously make arguments about the injury potential of Philadelphia. Is Cleveland's roster going to be good enough? Milwaukee's roster going to stay healthy? Is it going to fit right? All those different things. I don't think it's unfair that Miami's not on that list because we went through a whole summer talking about the lack of transactions, the lack of roster improvement, all those different things. And then to be upset about this, like this is evidence of what we've been all talking about, I think, the entire summer. Yeah,
no, and that is correct. And as I look at the West, there's a pretty good consensus in the West, too. 80% of the first place votes went to Oklahoma City, and the rest were split between Denver, Dallas, Phoenix. Minnesota did not get a vote for first seed, but they did get the majority of the second seed votes. And this is why I think this might have been done, or a lot of this might have been done, maybe early voting, so to speak, before the trade with the Knicks happened. Because I don't know that Minnesota would have gotten 40% of the second place votes after that trade. But, I mean, who knows? Maybe GMs like it better than my initial perception. But they have 8 different teams here that got at least 1 vote for a 4th seed, and that's OKC, Minnesota, Denver, Dallas, Phoenix, Memphis, New Orleans, and Golden State. What's interesting there to me is that 90% of the NBA coverage on ESPN is going to be devoted to a team that is not even picked by one general manager as a top 4 seed in the West, and that's the Lakers. Right?
Well, unfortunately, we know that's definitely the truth. Right? We talked about the tiers in the East. Where would you draw lines in the West? Like,
I can't.
Not just you.
I can't. I have this discussion. Where would you draw it? Because I have a hard time figuring it out because I don't think anybody is that much better than anybody else if certain things break right. Like, OKC fortified their roster, right? Minnesota made a trade. Denver's relying on Westbrook and the young guys to pop to get back where they were. Dallas has Gafford for an entire season, and PJ Washington for an entire season now. Phoenix helped, I think, their cause by balancing their roster with a couple of low turnover point guards. Memphis, I don't know where they're at. It depends, I guess, on how Edey plays and whether Ja can stay healthy. New Orleans is whether Zion can stay healthy, and I think Golden State's not very good. So I don't know. I mean, to me, would you be stunned if any of the top 7 teams listed there? And again, we're looking at this on YouTube right now, other than maybe Golden State. So maybe the top 7, if any of them came out of the conference?
No, not at all. I mean, 80% of the first place votes go to Oklahoma City, and I think they're the best team. If I had to pick one, I'd pick them also. But I don't feel like when we said Boston, when we go back here, Boston had 97% of the first place votes. We said they're in a tier of their own. I don't feel like Oklahoma City is in a tier of its own. I think the tier for me is probably Oklahoma City, Minnesota, Denver, Dallas, and then I would draw a line. But I don't think the gap then going down to Phoenix, Memphis, and New Orleans. And I agree with you on Golden State. I just don't think
No.
It's going to have to really break right for them to get up in that upper tier. I just think that there's two kind of packs versus in the East, you have Boston. And we didn't say this, but this is interesting. The only other first place vote went to the Cleveland Cavaliers. Like, that's odd to me. I don't know why that would be the pick.
I mean, I feel like they're a safe playoff team, but not a threat to win the conference in any way. Like, what would have to break right for Cleveland to win the conference? Like, you need Mitchell playing, first thing being healthy, second playing at an MVP level after he just got paid. And you would need Mobley to take a next step that we really haven't seen, even though the circumstances are the same. It's the same starting lineup where it feels like he's not a primary option. So yeah. I don't really get it. I think they'll be good, but I don't think there's any way they'll be great.
I do too. I think they're safe, like you said, but I don't think their ceiling isn't first seed. I think there would have to be so many things that happen around for that to actually break for the Cavs' way. But the West is going to be interesting. I mean, I think there's a lot of parity. You're going to have movement that happens amongst these teams, but all of these teams have questions. Even Oklahoma City, being as young as they are, was last year a flash for some of these guys. You saw, I did not like the Chet Holmgren the shooting form that I saw. Whatever he did to his shot, I don't know who's been working with him, but that was weird. Who knows? I mean, but it's going to be very competitive.
Yeah, no doubt. And as I take a look at these others, we'll work through them a little quicker before we get to some of the Heat stuff. So you just tell me just general thoughts on it. MVP, 40% Shea, 30% Luka, 7% split between Tatum, Jokic, and Embiid. Others receiving votes: Giannis, Jaylen Brown, and Anthony Edwards. To me, Jokic should be the MVP favorite until something happens to him, right? I mean, he's won 3 of 4. He could have won 4 of 4.
I mean, Joel said himself he's not playing for it this year, right? I mean, he's focused on other things, getting out of the second round. I agree with you on Jokic. I think he should be higher. If I had to pick one, I would say Luka, I think, has his breakout this year. SGA is obviously a great choice, but I'm surprised too, the buzz around Anthony Edwards, especially after the Olympics and how he was last year. I would think he would be higher. And then Tatum, while obviously on the overwhelming favorite, he's going to be in that list. I would put him above Tatum if it were me.
Yeah, well, me too. I mean, you know how I feel about Tatum. I also think that Edwards may have been higher if this voting was taken after Minnesota made the trade, because I feel like if they stay up there, he's going to get credit for it, which and he may deserve it. But I feel like this was done largely before that trade happened. If you were starting a franchise today, could sign any player in the NBA, who would it be? Victor Wembanyama, 77%. And then Shea and Jokic. I don't know how anybody could argue with Victor. Which player forces opposing coaches to make the most adjustments? Luka, Steph, Jokic, Giannis, Embiid in that order. Which player is most likely to have a breakout season? This is interesting because when we talked about Jaime Jaquez having a breakout season on a podcast we did about Jaime, Brady, myself, and Alex, the comp that we made, like the best possible scenario would be that he has a breakout into his second season like Jalen Williams did. And they actually have Jalen Williams with the highest percentage here of a breakout season now in what would be Williams' third season. So they have him at 13%. And then we've got Mobley, Ja. I don't know how it could be a breakout season for Ja. He's healthy. Okay, it's not a breakout season. Victor, Paolo, Cade Cunningham, Brandon Miller. Others receiving votes, and all I'll tell you is there's no Heat player here. LaMelo, Anthony Edwards, Derek Lively, Tyrese Maxey, Trey Murphy, Keegan Murray, Andrew Nembhard, Alperen Sengun, Cam Thomas. They're going to lose 65 games. Amen Thompson and Ausar Thompson. Last year, by the way, the choice was Anthony Edwards. And then I'll let you wrap on all these before we get to the Heat stuff and just get your general impressions. Best point guard in the NBA, Luka, 37%. Then Shea, Steph, and Brunson. Last year it was Curry. Best shooting guard in the NBA. It's always weird to me with Luka because he doesn't guard point guards, but I mean, that's how they have him listed because the ball's in his hands. Best shooting guard, Anthony Edwards, 33%. Then Booker, Shea. I guess he's available at both positions.
Oh, you know what I'm going to say about this. Just wait.
Right, like, what do we do with this? And
Luka is top 5 on 3 different positions. SGA is top 5 on 2 different positions. Positions don't matter.
I knew that's where you were going to go with this, but here's where I would go with it, just to argue with you momentarily. I would tell the GMs we're putting this player at this position.
Correct.
Because this is a ridiculous list now. Like it's just I know you say positionless, but then just say, okay, best guard. Like what are we doing here? Like you've got, again, like you said, Luka gets 37% of best point guard, 7% of best shooting guard, 17% of best small forward. If you put him at center, I'm sure somebody would pick him there too. This is just stupid. I mean, Shea, 30% on one, 20% on the other. Steph, 23% on one, 10% on the other. It's the same three guards. It's silly. Okay, I'm with you that it would be better to just say positionless. But the best thing to do would say Luka Doncic, for the purposes of this exercise, is a point guard. Steph Curry is a point guard. Shea is a point guard. Okay, because again, I don't think most people can. Or guards,
wings, bigs. Guards, wings, bigs. If you're going to use a label, use 3 labels. That's it.
I'm with you. Okay, best small forward. I don't agree with this. Tatum at 47%. And that's where I don't necessarily agree with you. I don't have Phoenix in a lower tier in the West because to me, if KD is KD, that changes the entire conversation about everything. And they have him at 17%. And I actually like what Phoenix did to his roster. And I can tell you from talking to Heat people in the Bahamas, they like what Phoenix did to their roster. And here's a nugget. They were interested in Tyus Jones. They were also interested in Gary Trent Jr. I don't know if I've dropped this anywhere, but there were certain guys who just felt like if they were going to take a minimum somewhere, it should be in a place where they had a clear path to having a big role. In Tyus's case, in Phoenix, and in Gary Trent's case, with Hero and Robinson, Duncan still on the roster here, it wasn't clear exactly where his playing time would come from, whereas Alec Burks took the opportunity. Trent wasn't necessarily going to take it. So, again, it's not because the Heat didn't have interest in certain players, but sometimes the fit is just not right because somebody can get an opportunity to play elsewhere, and the agent would prefer they go there. All right, on the other side of the break, we will get into the stuff that Heat fans are interested in, and we'll roll through those. Before we do, I want to mention a great sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network, and this is a special time to sort of know about them because obviously everybody in South Florida right now, Central Florida, North Florida, West Florida, they're dealing with this storm, and we always recommend water cleanup in Florida. So we just want to tell you right now, and this message came out from Michael, our guy at Water Cleanup. Again, they're based in Boca Raton. He's been all over the state, and he asked us to spread the word that WCUFL, again, this WCUFL.com, has been handling the flood cleanup work in St. Petersburg and Sarasota after Hurricane Helene. And now, due to Hurricane Milton, they're pausing from the West Coast work for a few days without knowing when they can return to reassess the jobs ongoing. They're anticipating the areas that were flooded a few weeks ago to get flooded again, perhaps with a higher storm surge. Again, we pray for the people up there. And then, so they're essentially going to be back in that area Thursday, Friday. But if you have an issue in South Florida, you still should reach out to the good folks at Water Cleanup Florida. Again, they will figure out a way to accommodate as many people as they can. And we do recommend in the future that you sign up for their preventative program because as you see, the storms in South Florida, Central Florida, I mean, they come eventually, and these are the best people in terms of handling it from start to finish. So WCUFL.com, it's Water Cleanup of Florida. If you've got the schmutz, they got the guts. All right, let's get to some of the rest of this list here, Sean. So I mentioned the best small forward in the NBA, Tatum at 47, then Doncic, Durant. I don't think – is there an – and we just saw it in the Olympics. Is there an NBA fan out there outside of Boston who, if they had a choice for one game to win one important game, would take Jason Tatum over Kevin Durant?
I mean, you're lower than a lot of people on him. I will say this. He's got to be somewhere in the top 3 of that list.
Is there a neutral NBA fan outside of Boston who would take for one game who would take Jason Tatum over LeBron James, who's at 17% on this list? Right now. LeBron right now. Man. This moment. What? I wouldn't. I mean, did Steve Kerr? Did Steve Kerr and Erik Spoelstra? Because I didn't see them do it. Okay, I am lower on him the most. I think Jaylen Brown's a better player, but I don't understand the entire fascination with him, and I probably never will. Anyway, not personal. I just don't see it. All right, best power forward in the NBA. You'll notice, by the way, who's not on that list. Jimmy Butler. Now, again, this is another situation being positionless. They have 2 guys listed at small forward here, Tatum and Jaylen Brown, on the same team. And again, Tatum plays a lot of 4. Well, I know, Sean, you don't want me to do that, but again, another of the flaws of the list. Who is the best power forward in the NBA? Giannis, 77%. Here, KD gets 7%. Others receiving votes: Anthony Davis, Draymond, Domantas Sabonis, Tatum again, and Wembanyama. Who's the best center? Jokic, 87%, Embiid, 10%, Wembanyama, 3%. How are we doing the Victor thing over Jokic at this point?
Well, and I think that's the interesting thing. I thought you were going to go for the Bam angle. If you're asking someone who is the best center in the NBA and you get one answer, I don't feel like – well, I agree with you. Wemby should not be on that list. But it's one person that said that. I don't agree, but I understand. But I also understand that's why Bam's not on this list. Is he one of the best centers in the league? Absolutely. Is he going to get an answer for the best center in the NBA? I don't feel bad about him not being on that list.
Well, and Windhorst had him as the second best center in the East, and I think that's fair. I think that's accurate. I think he's right behind Embiid. He's ahead of Towns, right?
It's a lot better than that other list that's been floating around from Action Network.
I know. I've seen that one too. I know that one's ridiculous. And then here's the highest percentage of total votes on position questions: Jokic, then Giannis, Luka, Shea, and Tatum, which is essentially the 5 guys who were the top 5 for MVP last year, right? Maybe not in that order, but I believe that was the top 5. Okay, I'm going to sprint through these because I do want to get to the Heat stuff, all right? Because, again, you're noticing something. We're not hearing a lot of Heat, right?
Sure.
Not that we expected to, but I think it reinforces not just what the fans think, but also what GMs think. Which team made the best overall moves this season? OKC, 37%, Philadelphia, 33%, Knicks, 20%. I don't know when that was taken. Also receiving votes, the Nets, the Magic, and the Kings. Last year, they said the Celtics and the Bucks, of course, worked out better for one than the other. I'm not going to argue with the Thunder one. I love their 2 moves, honestly. I think Hartenstein and Caruso, perfect high-end role players when you're building out your stars. Which one player acquisition will make the biggest impact? Paul George, 60%. Mikal Bridges, 13%. Cat, so this was done after it, 13%. Caruso, again, I like that move, 7%. Then they also have DeRozan, Hartenstein. Again, no Heat because they weren't going to put Alec Burks on here. What was the most underrated player acquisition? Caruso, 23%. Then KCP, Hartenstein, Tyus Jones. I like all 4 of those moves. Klay Thompson, and then Chris Paul. Which team will be most improved? Memphis, 67%. I mean, it's hard not to be when Ja's coming back. Spurs, 13%. Sixers, 7%. Also receiving votes: Pistons, Rockets, Magic, Suns. Again, no Heat. What was the most surprising move of the offseason? Cat to New York and all that. Okay, rookie of the year? They have Reed Shepherd at 50% to Houston, which is interesting. Which rookie will be the best player in 5 years? This one stunned me, actually. Reed Shepherd, 43%. I know this was not a great draft. Are you that in on him?
I'm someone with stock in the Stephon Castle Rookie of the Year market, but you know what? When you expand it out to 5 years, that's where you would think Reed can play well now and somebody will pass him. But he had a great summer league, and people are very high on him. So I know you see the number narrows a little bit from 50% to 43. I don't know who I would pick. I mean, I like Castle. I don't know. It's a lot of question marks. Reese Shea, Bub Carrington's a good guard. Alex Sarr obviously was drafted high.
Well, here's the other part of this, and Heat fans, there's 9 players on there. There's no where, right?
Okay. I had that in my notes. And
thoughts on that?
Bronny James isn't on there either, apparently.
Nah, I thought he get 100% of the vote.
It's not an ESPN list, apparently.
No.
Yeah, I was surprised that Ware didn't get any. As we keep going through this, he's not on anything. Biggest steal, nothing.
Biggest steal, Ware selected in the draft. Here's how many players got at least 1 vote, because Bub Carrington, Devin Carter, who I like a lot, Johnny Furphy, Dalton Neck, and Terrence Shannon, they all got 10%. But there's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's like 20 players that got a vote for the biggest steal for where they were selected. And I think most Heat fans, based on what they saw in Summer League and the fact that the guy was all first team, was all Summer League first team, would say that he would get one of the 20 or whatever, however many 30 general managers would have picked him as the biggest steal, and yet nobody did.
Kyle Filipowski got a vote. Jared McCain, his TikToking guy got a vote. I mean,
right. I mean, I don't even know. I mean, I guess I should have. Baylor Shireman. I mean, again, I mean, what are we doing here? Like, I would look. they could sleep on him, and I do think it's going to take longer than others think. You and I think are in agreement on this. Like,
yes,
he's not coming out of training camp as a starting four next to five next to Bam. He's probably not even going to get any playing time when Bam gets hurt early on. It's going to be Thomas Bryant starting, and there's going to be riots in the streets, and we're going to have to put those out and deal with it, right? But that's the way it is. But I still like the pick, and I don't think we've seen anything so far that would discourage us from his long-term future. And I would think he would be one of the bigger steals at that number based on what we saw in Summer League, because some thought he was the best player in Summer League. Just wasn't as consistent, wore down a little bit at the end, but some thought he was the most impactful of the rookies. Obviously, Jaime Jaquez came in for 2 games, lit the world on fire, but that's what second-year high-end player or high-level players are supposed to do. All right, so anyway, so we think Ware got kind of snubbed here. But then best international player in the NBA. Okay, these are best international player. Not in the NBA, we don't need that. Okay, here's the one that I think the Heat fans are going to lock in on. The best defensive player in the NBA, 40% Wemby, and then 10% each for Drew, Rudy Gobert, and Bam. And then you've got Giannis, Anthony Davis, and Herb Jones at 7%. Also receiving votes, Caruso, Jaden McDaniels, and Marcus Smart. Last year, it was Giannis at 40%. I love Wemby. I love everything he's about. I love his personality, his thirst for learning. I think he's going to be tremendous, provided his body holds up. Aren't we getting ahead of ourselves at this point? I mean, they were 20. What were they in defense last year? Like 25th in the league in defense. Like, doesn't that matter? I know he can't clean up everything, but look what was playing around Bam. I mean, look at the Heat's backcourt. Okay, I mean, there's, and I just don't get like why there is this rush. He's going to get there. Why does everybody have to anoint Wemby now?
Well, he's going to have an opportunity to prove these people right. I mean, obviously, we know he's very good. We're not poo-pooing on Victor Wembanyama, but I agree with you that a lot of times when you hear about Wemby last year, you hear the difference between when he was on the floor and when he was off the floor, and they were terrible on defense when he was off the floor, and they were better when he was on. Well, if you do that with Bam, it's going to be the same difference. I mean, like, so I would be pushing back more on the fact that he only got 10% of the votes, which would be essentially 3 different votes, whereas Wemby got 4 times as many. He has as many votes as Rudy Gobert. Drew Holiday, I'm not going to argue, great player, but I still feel like Bam should have more votes. And to be the second best player in the league, I don't think that's a bad thing, but I also feel like he deserves a higher number than 10% of those votes. You're muted. Ethan, you're muted.
Sorry about that. So going through the rest of this, okay? Best perimeter defender, the Heat don't have anybody who fits that classification, and Drew won that, rightly so. Best interior defender, they have Victor again with 40%, Bam 7%, but I wouldn't vote for Bam there because that's not really what he does. No. It's the next one. Who is the most versatile defender in the NBA? I'm sorry. Like, I'm not. Giannis is at 17%, Anunoby's at 13%, Victor's at 13%, Bam at 10%. I'm not ready to put Victor ahead of Bam for most versatile defender in the NBA. I mean, you're not asking Wemby to do the things that Bam is asked to do to anchor what was a better defense. Giannis, okay, I get it when he's been healthy, but I don't even know that Giannis would argue that he's ahead of Bam. I don't know. I see, to me, that's the category I look at, and I'm like, that's what GMs are not seeing, apparently. Like, for Bam to only get like 3 or I don't know what that equates to, 3 votes basically on that list. He's the most versatile defender in the NBA. I don't think we can argue whether he's the best. Okay, if you value more what Gobert provides, I don't. Or if you value more what Drew provides, okay, as far as being more traditional defenders for their particular positions. But if you're talking about versatility, guarding various positions, I mean, it's Bam 1, and to me, I guess it would be Giannis 2. But I don't. Again, I don't know how you put Victor ahead of him. I don't get it.
I was talking about this with Eternal earlier on Twitter, and I don't think between Giannis, Wemby, and Bam, you throw those 3 in a hat, and whoever comes out first, I wouldn't argue it that much. OG, I know, and Drew Holiday, I know, are great defenders, and they can size up. They're very physical. They're very strong. They're smart IQ defenders. I just don't think they belong up in that top part of that list. great defenders, but the versatility that Giannis can guard a true center. OG, yes, I know he went up against Embiid last year in the playoffs a little bit, but that's like a small fraction of the game versus Bam, I know, is not going to go out there and just guard a point guard, but you can match him up as the primary defender against Jason Tatum, who we saw earlier is the best small forward in the NBA, according to this list. I just don't see the same versatility. Giannis, Victor, and Bam, sure. But those other guys, I think we're stretching it too far.
Yeah, I think so too. All right, here's the last part of this, and this is the one where we finally get someone from the Heat. And this is what I've been saying, that the Heat put their primary financial resources where they outspend other teams is for support personnel, right? And I'm not meaning that in a demeaning way. I mean, people to support the players on the roster, right? So whether it's the coaches or the people who, go out and acquire the additional players like the Adam Simons, et cetera, they've constantly promoted, Andy, Spo, Adam Simon, et cetera, because the idea again is first thing, that doesn't count against the aprons. Okay. Like this, Sean, the funniest thing yesterday, I was at the game and people are complaining about the gorgeous new scoreboard and fireball and seats and everything. See, that's where the money went. No, it has nothing to do with it. Creating a new scoreboard with underbelly screens does not count against the second apron, does not prevent you from picking up buyout players or drop you to the bottom of the first round. It has nothing to do with that. There are ways to enhance the overall experience for your fans, and then additionally, ways to try to get more out of your roster that don't trigger some of these penalties that are triggered by simply overspending on mediocre players. Okay, so again, I just want to be clear on that. But this is really, this is the Heat story now. The Heat story now is people around the league think the roster's okay with some upside if they're healthy, but not elite, right? And that seems to be the consensus. It's good. It's not a lottery roster. There's a lot of interesting young players on it. Bam is still improving and may ultimately become your number one on both ends, although we'll see, but he certainly is showing more signs of it. And you still have Jimmy, and Jimmy can still be Jimmy at times. They hope, we hope, etc. Okay. But there is a consensus, essentially, that Erik Spoelstra can just get more out of it. And so you look at this poll, this isn't even close. Who's the best coach in the NBA? Spoelstra, 69%. Okay. Only 5 coaches got votes, by the way. Which head coach is the best manager motivator of people? Erik Spoelstra, 37%. By the way, second is Steve Kerr, and the two of them work together on the Olympic staff. Which head coach makes the best in-game adjustments? Ty Lue wins that one at 28%. He was the other pro NBA coach on the Olympic staff. Spoelstra, 24%. Danio at 17%. Okay. Last year it was also Spoelstra. By the way, last year also best manager and motivator of people was Spoelstra. Last year the best head coach was Spoelstra. So these are 3 categories where essentially he scored about the same as he did last year. This is one where Spo is in the also receiving votes category, though. Which head coach runs the best offense? It's Carlisle at 47%, Mazzulla 17%, Finch at 13%, Kerr at 10%. And again, Spo is one of the other receiving votes. And I'll just stop here to let you in. I don't think Heat fans would even argue with this one, right? Because this is where they want to see growth from Spo.
I agree, but we're also putting him amongst what? He's in the top 8. And most Heat fans, the vocal Heat fans, would not put him in the top 8. They would put him in the bottom 8. And they would say that the offense is broken and all those different things. He's amongst some really good coaches. Nick Nurse is known to be a very good offensive coach. Michael Malone, very good offensive coach. I don't think he obviously belongs in the top 4. Because the results are not there. The evidence is there. Right. But I agree. He has to evolve and reinvent and find ways to squeeze, right now, the juice out of these rocks. Like, we don't have a lot of offensive power on this team. He's going to have to find a way to make that happen.
Which head coach has the best defensive schemes? Last year, Spoelstra won at 40%. This year, he won at 23%. Remember, too, last year, Spo was coming off a finals appearance. So he's fresher in GM's minds, but he still wins the category. And then it was Finch, Thibodeau, Mazzulla, Danio, Jamal Mosley, and Ime Udoka. He's not in the relocated. And then this one was I liked this one because it's good to see him get some credit. Best assistant coach in the NBA. Chris Quinn got 7% of the vote, which tied for 4th. And again, the Heat are making a concerted effort to get his name out there. It's the fact that they gave him the promotion on the staff. He has had some interviews, and I give the Heat credit for this. They just like when Erik Spoelstra sat down with David Fizdale in the Ritz-Carlton and in Coconut Grove, and for like 3 days they shut the door in a meeting room so that he could prepare for the Memphis job. They will take care of. Spo is very big on making sure his assistants get opportunities, and so Quinn's up there. I'll go through a few more of these, and I want to let you sort of close the loop on Spo. But which team is the most fun to watch? Heat are not in that. Not surprising. Pacers win that. Which team has the best home court advantage? It's the Nuggets. The Heat can't even argue that. They were bad at home last year. Which team will have the league's most efficient offense this season? I think it's fair to say the Celtics deserve this over the Heat. Heat are not in there. Which team's level of success is most difficult to predict? Lakers at 17%. They've got 6 teams here. The Heat did get a vote. There were like 15 teams that got votes. Which team has the most promising young core? Thunder at 60%. 5 teams are chosen here. The Heat's not in there. Which player is the most athletic? Bam did get a 1 vote on that. And then really, I don't think any other Heat players show up. Best leader, best passer, most versatile player. Bam did get a vote there. Best basketball IQ, no. And all the rest of this stuff. So I'll just, what is your overall thought as you review this and where Spo fits, but pretty much doesn't seem like Jimmy's not on these lists anywhere.
No, I don't. Jimmy's name is not on this list today. I think it's fair. I mean, there's not a lot that I would push back on. I think the defensive stuff, I think we had good points there. Spo obviously deserves his flowers. Duncan was mentioned about shooting in terms of, let me find how they worded it. Best movement shooter, player best moving without the ball. Duncan did receive a vote. Steph obviously got that with 83%. Duncan did not get one of the best pure shooters, which I think is an absolute travesty. Steph Curry got 87% of the votes on that one. Yeah. But you know what? Like, I think, looking at what we talked about, I think that is an honest assessment. We know that we have good players. We just don't have great players. We're not going to get guys on the list of young cores and things like that. Our coaching staff is elite. I'm sure if you had it pushed out there to talking about the scouting staff and what Adam Simon does, I'm sure he would be high on that list also. But that being said, I think, we saw this on media day. Spo, are you afraid? These lists are just things on paper. And so I'm sure these are on bulletin boards somewhere type of thing. Like, you know what I mean? It's just like, it's motivation. Nobody respects us. Nobody thinks we're good. We're not good enough here. We're not good enough there. You're not good enough in certain areas. And hopefully they can prove these GMs wrong.
Yeah, and I think a couple of the guys could kind of move into the national sight lines this year. I think Jaquez is one of them. I could absolutely see if Jaquez has kind of a mini breakout this year that he could be on the list for biggest breakout the year after. And I do think that as Bam continues to grow offensively, that it's stupid, but people will start to actually focus in on what he does defensively. Because to me, the silliest thing of all of this was him not being the most versatile defender. Because I don't see how you make an argument against that. But anyway, that's where we are. I want to thank Sean for sitting in here. If you're listening to this before the preseason game, we'll have coverage of the Heat's preseason game in Charlotte. The Heat are not going to have a preseason game Thursday night because of the storm that's been pushed back a week, or 6 days. And I've been told to tell everybody that your tickets will be honored for that game if you choose to use them. Otherwise, you can get your money back at point of sale. Good luck to our guy Michael with Water Cleanup of Florida doing the good work up there, and everybody stay safe.